in the programs that we're running. We're driving down recidivism by the way we're treating people. And Chris, you said, you use that analogy to a zoo. I mean, this place is, these places are not zoos. If you treat people like animals, they'll behave like animals, and then they'll return to their communities like animals.
Correct.
If you treat them like human beings, they'll behave like human beings, again, making it safer inside that facility, but they'll return with a modicum of self-respect that they can take into the community, of knowing that in the worst place that they should be, they were actually treated with respect and given some hope that they can be a better person. That is what's really gratifying, when you know that has having an impact on those that are in our custody, but again, also on the officers that watch out for these folks and care for these folks. They feel better about their jobs as well. It's a safer environment. It's a more successful environment.
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor, and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black Executive Perspective.
BEP is on fire. Our audience is growing fast and the impact is real. Now is the time for your brand to grow with us and reach a highly engaged, influential community with real spending power. Don't miss this moment. Email us today at media@TonyTidbit.com. Let's make it happen and put you and your brand in front of the people that matter. We are coming to you live from the new BEP studio for another thought-provoking episode of a Black Executive Perspective podcast. Safe space. We discuss all matters regarding race, culture, and those uncomfortable topics people tend to avoid. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit.
And I'm your co-host, Chris P. We'd like to always start off by reminding you to check out our partners at Code M Magazine. Code M Magazine, whose mission is saving the Black family by first saving the Black man. Check them out at CodeMMagazine2Ms.com.
Definitely check them out. And today, check out who we welcome back to a Black Executive Perspective podcast. Our favorite U.S. Sheriff, Sheriff Peter Koutoujian of Middlesex County, Massachusetts. He's coming back here to talk about how his office is rewriting the future of corrections in America. Sheriff K will walk us through the creation of the nation's first Older Adult Reentry Unit, a groundbreaking data-driven model that fuses public health, public safety, as well as human dignity. From the surge of aging incarcerated individuals to the specialized programs built for veterans, young adults, and older adults, the sheriff will lay out a bold, practical vision of what meaningful criminal justice reform can truly be. We want to welcome back an old friend, Sheriff Peter Koutoujian. Welcome back to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, my brother.
Tony and Chris, great to be back with you. I remember Black Executive Perspective before it was a nationally award-winning podcast, man. I remember when you guys were just a regular podcast. Now you're famous.
Yeah, we were putting slugs in pinball machines, and now we got a couple of nickels. So
it is great to see your growth. I mean, honestly, you had such a great product, and you were such great hosts, and your engagement was so real. It's great to see it's being noticed by the industry as well.
Thank you, my brother. We really appreciate that.
Well, Sheriff Koutoujian, that's because of guests like you that got on with thought-provoking and provocative commentary that helped us, gain an audience and actually reach the people where they needed to be reached. So we absolutely welcome you back. You're an old friend.
Amen.
So remind the folks, just from last time, a couple people have slept since then. Tell us where you reside and kind of a little bit about your family, things of that nature.
So first, let me say, I always like to introduce myself wherever I am. That I'm a kid from Waltham, Massachusetts. I grew up in my hometown of Waltham. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a city clerk, both public servants. It was my sister and I. And I ended up going to a state university. I love the school. My son goes there now. I've ended up going to law school, being fortunate enough to get accepted into law school, quite honestly, because I wasn't as diligent in my studies as I should have been initially. Then went on to become a public defender while practicing privately as an attorney. Then becoming a prosecutor. Then becoming a state representative, during which time I served as the chairman of the committee on healthcare for a number of years. And I went and got a master's in public administration at the Kennedy School here in Cambridge. And then now I'm sheriff in Middlesex County here in Massachusetts. So it's been this weird wending path, one that for those that always wonder what's next for me or how should I prepare for my future, it's one that I always said the harder I worked, the luckier I got. And if I worked hard, opportunities presented themselves, opportunities I never looked for, sought, coveted, but presented themselves at the right time in my life. And I think it's a good model for those that sometimes worry about that 5-year, 10-year plan. You don't necessarily have to have that. If you work really hard, things turn out good for you, I believe.
You talked about your son being a legacy at the university. What are you doing now currently that he could possibly be a legacy for from an occupational standpoint?
You mean like would my son like to follow my path as well?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
He seems to be right now?
He seems to be interested in it. The thing that I love most about him is that he got what I got from my dad is a love of public service and what you can do for people. And what I really enjoyed watching, he did a couple of internships. His major is political science, but he's done work in U.S. Senator's office in Washington, U.S. Senator's office here in Boston. But what I really liked is he worked for a neighborhood development corporation, and he working with the neighborhood, with people in the neighborhood to change policies that impact their lives, right? He helped organize a peace walk and a peace rally, and he did things like that. And that to me, because politics, I always believe, are ways to impact policies that affect people's lives. It's not politics for politics' sake. Sometimes, unfortunately, people enjoy politics for politics' sake. For me, politics is a way to impact people's lives. And I feel like he's following that pathway, which is good. And I don't know if he'll end up in politics or just in policy, right, but I know he'll end up in service. And that's the main thing for me. And I'm very proud of him for that. And I think my other son and my daughter especially too, I think will also find some pathway like that as well, which really is gratifying as a dad.
Where do you find your current focus on service as of today? I know we talked about what you had going on in the past, but obviously things evolve. You kept the gas, foot on the gas. So what are you working on today?
Man, we are still developing new models, new programs. It's an exciting time to be in corrections. There's so much need out there. Wherever I go, I ask people, do you know someone that's, struggled with substance use disorder? I just did it at Thanksgiving luncheon just recently. And I don't know, 80, 90% of the people out of hundreds of people raised their hands. Do you know someone struggled with mental illness? 80 or 90% raised their hands. Do you know someone that's actually been incarcerated? Again, it was 80 or 90%, and more like 90% for each of those questions. They raised their hands. These are just regular people out there in the community, and I use that to show them that the people that are incarcerated are not those people. They're our people. They're our friends and our family, and they're our neighbors' children, and they're not those people. They're our people, and so there's always more that we can do for this population that goes underserved, ignored, and often unnoticed by many in our society, and yet their families suffer while they're incarcerated and while they're going through their justice involvement and while they're incarcerated as well. And it's kind of heartbreaking when you think about all these people that need that helping hand, that need that hand. You reach out that hand, and they may not take it that first time, that second time, that third time. It might be a 10th time or 15th time, whatever that time is. If your hand is not out there outstretched, ready to pull them up, pull them in, pull them on board, that could have been the one time that you could have saved their life and saved the lives of their family as well. That's a really powerful mission for me, and it's something I continue to explore ways to improve how we provide services for those people, not just those people, but even their family members that are not incarcerated, because we need to serve them as well while their loved one is incarcerated. Because I always say that the family members of those that are incarcerated struggle and suffer financially, socially. Those children of those that are incarcerated are much more likely to become justice involved and incarcerated themselves. So while we're serving those that are incarcerated, we have to remember that there are many other people that are unseen in our communities That's the family members of those that are incarcerated that need that support, so that those families don't run that same pathway in the future as well.
Right, right. Well, listen, my friend, you've had your hand out in terms of helping people since you've been a sheriff. You know, you came on last time, chatted about Frederick Douglass program that you put together that got a wide area of accolades, and rightfully so. You're very busy. You know, a lot of people don't recognize what a sheriff is. I believe $150 million. You oversee $150 million or $200 million budget, something to that level. You're traveling. You're all different type of committees. You got a lot on your plate. So the question I have for you is, why did you want to come back to a Black Executive Perspective podcast to talk about this topic?
You know, that's a great question, and this is why.
It's time to rethink your protein. AgileLab's protein bars are crafted with high-quality protein, double the leucine, and enriched branched-chain amino acids, essential for optimal muscle recovery. Finally, a protein bar that works as hard as you do. So visit agilelabs.com and use the code BEP to get 20% off. That's agilelabs.com, promo code BEP.
Something I always say is a jail is not a fortress on a hill, it's part of a community. And if a community doesn't understand what you're doing, doesn't appreciate your mission, and is not supportive of your mission, then that mission will fail. And we need more data-driven, research-driven, innovative correctional programs and opportunities for those that are incarcerated. There's not enough innovation going on in corrections, I don't believe. And so I believe that as an executive, I have a responsibility to provide the best opportunities I can for those that are in my care. And that is done through replicating a program. If there's something out there, finding out what it is and copying that and pulling it in, maybe changing some things to tinker it to fit my organization. And if it doesn't exist, then you got to create it. And then you don't just create it. You collect the data on it to see if it's efficacious, if it's working or not. And if it is, then you need to tell everyone about it so that it can be replicated from that source. And there's many that fail in either replicating a good program, copying, creating, or if they have created something, to tell people about it so that it can be replicated. That's the most important thing I think we do as leaders in any industry, including here in corrections.
Well, buddy, look, as always, we're glad that you came on our show to be able to share, because you are, and we're not saying this as hyperbole, you are one of the few in the corrections industry that is forward thinking and innovative. So we definitely want to hear what you got going on. So you ready to talk about it, my brother?
Let's go. I'm ready. I'm excited.
All right, let's talk about it.
You know what? It's funny because you are uniquely positioned to kind of see things from so many angles because of your resume. So, you know, you've done so many things, and you have a hometown guy, you know, born and raised and love it to death. But the aspect of you feeling like there needs to be pioneering efforts, why do you kind of take up the mantle of the person who has a philosophy of, hey, if it doesn't already exist, I need to find a way to make it exist? What is that? Where does that come from? And why do you go through the troubles of doing, you know, such Herculean efforts when we've had established penal systems for hundreds and hundreds of years? What makes you the guy to come in and change it all down, tear it all down?
You know, Chris, honestly, that's a great question. And sometimes I wonder that myself, because I find myself always striving. The one thing that I cannot suffer is mediocrity, right? People that don't care, that don't try to improve. It's something that really frustrates me. And for good or for bad, quite honestly, I mean, I think it's for good for the professions, but sometimes it's hard on a leader, for any of your leadership. I'm sure you guys have seen this, when you're striving and pushing and driving, and you're the one that has to continue to bang your head against that wall or that ceiling, whatever it is, constantly in order to get something done that you think is straight up common sense, right? but the world may not see it, may not understand it, is not ready for it, whatever that might be. You have to be the one to continue to push it until your vision becomes reality. And I found that, I found this to be frustrating in my life. And I'm sure for many of the leaders, I'm sure you have a number of great leaders for your podcast, but when you see something that could be done better, should be done better, or is not being done at all, if you don't do it, no one else will. That's the problem. If I don't do it, I don't think anyone else will either. This is the way that I feel about it. If I feel like oftentimes if there's something that doesn't exist and I don't do something about it, then it will either be done not at all or it will not be done well. And I have the ability, or in the people surrounding me in my organization, to make that difference. We all have a window of opportunity in our lives, professionally and personally. And if we don't do as much as we can in that window, then it's a waste of our time and opportunity, and it's a waste of opportunity for those people that we serve, most importantly, not just for ourselves, but for those that we serve.
So, and I hear that, right? And it makes sense. However, you're in the corrections industry, okay? Where, the mindset, and let's be fair, for most adults, most people, is lock them up. And if they got 3 square meals a day, that's a great day for them. Okay. And we're not looking for innovation when it comes to corrections. Okay. Because they did something that they got locked up now, and they don't need extra type stuff. Right. However, you reject the one size fits all, right? Let's be fair, that most corrections facilities across the country, they're not looking to do, they didn't do a Frederick Douglass thing. They're not looking to prepare people for reentry. They're not thinking of the families, because if the person's not prepared for reentry, not only does that person struggle, but it also affects their family. They're not thinking that. Okay, let's be fair. Now you have a new program, right, for older adults. Okay, so this ain't something that, let's be fair here, right? And I know you're a very humble guy, but let's be honest. Most people wouldn't even think about that. They just wouldn't, right? It's not on the radar. It's like, save money, build more jails, blah, blah, blah. So why do you care? Okay, because to be fair, your job is not to, I don't want to say it's not to care, but that's not part of the job description. Okay, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Let me add on to that. Before, because this is the common man's perspective.
Yeah.
The people that you help the most won't even be able to vote for you. Probably when you're not building a voter base theoretically.
Exactly.
So
It's
help
true.
me understand. Help me understand why you're so altruistic that you're like, listen, whether it's, but you said the families, the community.
All
and I
that.
want you to kind of dig into that a little more, because that really unveiled a little bit to me as you were speaking in the beginning of, okay, maybe that's what it is that he realizes it's a bigger picture here. Because to be honest, people in your position would think, what is the immediate return on investment? And I don't see it in that regard for voters.
Exactly.
Totally understand. So we all have a responsibility to do programs that will be effective, right? Mm-hmm. Now, we have a responsibility not to spend too much money, right? We've got to be responsible about the money.
Right.
But we have a responsibility, if we are going to establish or create a program, to collect the data to show whether that program works or not.
If you like what you hear and want to join us on this journey of making uncomfortable conversations comfortable, please subscribe to a Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe now to stay connected for more episodes that challenge, inspire, and lead the change.
Right? And that's what I take very seriously. I mean, that's what I love about data. Firstly, it steers you on to the program, it steers you in the program both midstream, but also at the end of the program to show if it worked. And then it shows, and then it validates if you are actually going to tell people about the program or have it replicated. It does work. We have a responsibility to those that are in our custody to prepare them for their reentry, that will be successful. And in that is successfully reentering and reengaging with their family, but it also means getting a job, paying taxes, not committing other crimes. And so if I can do my job well, I can actually create a much safer community. And in those same efforts, a more humane community. And that's what I really get to that's what I love about it, because, when you've got people that are incarcerated, they're not all the same. They're all unique. And groups within that have unique needs that are not being addressed in a unique way. We're treating everyone like they're the same. Every person in jail, every criminal is the same. And they might have many elements that are the same, and much of them will be mental illness. The mental illness rates among those that are incarcerated are higher now than ever before. The substance use and addiction rates are much higher than ever before. But within that are many different silos of people. And so that's why we have specialized treatment units, whether it's, we've created so many innovative programs. Our incarcerated housing unit for incarcerated military veterans, our young adult offender program, which was our first one for those 18 through 26. By the way, these are programs that we were treating these groups the same, and the results were the same. They weren't successful. And then a women's pre-release unit, and then a medication-assisted treatment unit, and a family support services unit. These are things that no one's thought of before, and that have worked really well. And lastly, the Older Adult Reentry Unit. What's also important, though, too, is the job of a corrections officer and staff is really difficult, right?
Right.
Like police and fire and other first responders. Higher rates of divorce and substance use disorder and mental health concerns, suicide, premature mortality rates. So it's a really hard job. What we found is the more innovative programming that we are engaging in at the facility that we can show works, the more trainings that we do that are appropriate for those units, the better the wellness is, I believe, of our officers as well, right? So now they're not just walking up and down a tier, checking for what we call in the industry living, breathing flesh to make sure someone is alive and well in their cell or in the dorm, wherever it may be. Now they're actually participating in something more positive. They're actually engaging in positively with someone to help them get a little bit better. They're treating them more humanely. What's really important too, though, is that they're also being treated themselves more humanely by the incarcerated population.
The inmates, yeah. Because
they do. Listen, I'd rather give all sorts of programs and have people get out and be safer, but I also want the facility to be safe. And if I can offer more programming, more educational opportunities, and so many other things that we do up here, and I keep the population engaged and occupied and happier, that means my officers are going to be safer as well. So it's something that affects an entire culture, not just that unit, but an entire culture. And then that culture continues to drive itself to become better and healthier and better and healthier. And then the officers start to innovate within each of those units themselves and participate in driving the culture of those individual units. It's something that continues to propel itself for the betterment of everybody.
You said uniqueness, right? Because you said, hey, everybody's unique and stuff of that nature. And obviously, you talked about it a few minutes ago as well, is that people that's incarcerated mirror society, okay? And so talk a little bit about the aging population, because, you have the baby boomer population. So even outside of the prison walls, America is getting older. There's an older segment population. So that's no different within the prison system, right?
That's right.
So talk a little bit about those older incarcerated individuals, and why you came up with the new program that you have now specifically for their uniqueness.
Yeah. So it's really a one-off from what we did for young adults. A lot of the science, 10 years ago was showing us that young adults had a later maturation than we kind of had really understood, a later frontal lobe development. They make riskier choices by nature of their youth and
I was going
Yes,
to
sir.
ask you, what's the ages on that? So when you say
So
young
that's
adults,
18 through 26 years
got
old.
it, got it,
Right?
got it, got it.
And when you think about it, what is the one group that rental cars don't rent to? It's those that are under 26, right? Because they figured, the actuaries figured this out long before
The data,
social
yeah.
science did, right?
Yeah.
And what they do is they show that people are not maturing as fast as we thought. They're engaging in riskier behaviors. They don't understand the consequences of their actions. And for the most part, the young men that we have up here also suffered a lot of trauma in their home, right? They have these traumatic backgrounds. Their dads may not be around. And so all of these things led to a population that continued to engage in riskier behaviors, failed to understand the consequences of their actions, and so continued to recidivate and continue to stay in carceral facilities over series and lifetimes sometimes, right? So this is something science was showing us. We adopted the first young adult offender unit in a jail in the country because the science was showing what we were doing was not working. So we took a different tack on it, and it worked remarkably well. This is on the other end of that spectrum because the older adult population, as we're seeing more, as you guys are not, too old, but you should be watchful for this as you age, as I'm watching for this, that science is showing us that older adults are suffering in different ways that we didn't understand. And they're growing at a rapider rate. Just a few years ago, our population of older adults in our facility, meaning 55 plus, was 5%. Most recently was 10%. Nationally, by 2030, 1 in 4 Americans is going to be the age 60 or above.
Wow.
60 or above. This is called the graying of America, but it's all the graying of corrections. So when this population was first being considered, it was really about the health care, the geriatric care, more ill, chronically ill, older, living a hard life sometimes, and being very costly. And so how do we manage their health care? I took it a step further in how do we manage their lives? Because truly, I think it's 40% of our population have been incarcerated at least 4 times, and many of them above 10 times. And by the way, each year that you're incarcerated is that you age 2 years, right? Because being incarcerated ages you very quickly. And so I just knew that we were doing something wrong, and we couldn't treat this population like we do everyone else. We're not preparing them for their unique needs upon their reentry. And so I could have started a unit, but I really wanted to ground it in research. And so we engaged with the UMass Boston McCormick Institute on Gerontology to see if there was a need and what was that need. And for 2 years, they came to our facility. They studied our population. They interviewed our inmates. They interviewed our staff. They did some research, and they came to the conclusion that it was something that we needed to do. So then we looked around to try to find a unit like I wanted to create, and all we could find was elder housing units or geriatric units for healthcare. It wasn't to prepare them for the unique reentry needs, which was what they really needed. And a lot of these guys just come and go out of a facility like ours, and they're just not prepared to live on the outside, not just how to get a job and so forth, but how to live that next 10 or 15 or maybe 20 years of their lives. They're not prepared to do that, like many men are not prepared to do right now.
You talk about recidivism and that being the concept of people getting out and going back in. Interestingly enough, studies show that when people get accustomed to a conditioned lifestyle, think about military people, think about people that you know or I know that have been in college forever, just can't stop taking classes because they like the stability of being told what to do, when, where, and why, and they just don't really know how to operate independently and autonomously. It's not just criminals. This is just normal psychology, right?
Regular people. Yeah,
but the concept of I'm going to be a detractor here and say I'm in Texas, and that stuff, that feely touchy, approach to human, rights and dignity might work in Massachusetts, but that's not something that dog don't hunt here, as they say. What would you say to those who say this is not for Arizona, California, Texas, some of the places where they feel like their prisoners need to have a stronger hand and a sterner voice than yours do in Massachusetts?
So what I'll say is this. A number of our programs, as we've created them, our military veterans unit, our young adult offender unit, have actually been replicated in Arizona, Texas, and Florida. Like literally, our medication assisted treatment unit was replicated in Arizona, Texas, and Florida, and California, and elsewhere in the country. Some of my closest friends are sheriffs from border counties, that are seeing death and devastation and trafficking coming across their borders toward them, right? That's why I don't criticize, for those sheriffs, they're seeing a very different look to the immigration issue than I see in Massachusetts, right? They see people suffering and families suffering and children suffering and being trafficked and drug trafficking going on. But when you speak about a program that works, makes their facility safer, makes their community safer, they're all in. And I've got the data to show it. And so this is where, as much as they might laugh at me a little bit sometimes, they tease me about being from Massachusetts. The fact is, they elected me as National Sheriff of the Year just last year. These are my colleagues from, much more conservative states across this country chose me as their National Sheriff of the Year because of the innovation that I bring to them. And a number of them have actually utilized what we created here. And by the way, I will always be the first one to utilize something they have that I can bring up here too. But in many of these cases, they've actually seen something we're doing. And again, as I said, if you create something, if something exists out there, replicate it, copy it, just take it, man, right? If it doesn't, create something. But if you create something, collect the data, show whether or not it's working. If it doesn't work, shut it down, restart it. But then if it does work, you have a responsibility to preach from the rafters and tell people about it. And that's something that we take very seriously here. We speak at national conferences. We've done this with our OR unit, Older Adult Reentry Unit, over and over again. Baltimore, we've got National Sheriff's Association. We've got American Jail Association coming up. We just did National Commission on Correctional Healthcare presentation. So these are places I take it very seriously, go speak about the program we're doing so that they can either take our program or a version that's appropriate for their community and use that as well.
So, Sheriff K, tell us what makes this unit different than the regular housing that's set up for inmates. Talk a little bit about the differentiation, and then more importantly, what it's going to do from a data standpoint in terms of longevity, helping people become more ready to come out and to the point not come back in, and also for their families to be prepared for them as well.
Well, one, this is fully research-based. So we work with the University of Massachusetts, Boston School of Gerontology, but we're full-on partnering with the BU School, Boston University School of Occupational Therapy, Sargent College there. It could be the most substantive correctional academic partnership in the country. It's that deeply tied in together, and they love the program. We were just featured on a magazine from the university, from the Sargent College, and they actually featured an incarcerated individual on the cover of the magazine. It's the first time they've not had a faculty member, I think, as the cover of the magazine. So it's really, this is how much they bought into this. But we also work with North Carolina State and the University of Wyoming on other ways to take a look at things. We have a frailty index that we have, meaning those that are at greater risk and need to get into this facility maybe earlier than others, that we work with these programs. So it's fully academic and research based. And then we are collecting the data on it. But what's really most important is we've got 5 pillars. And the 5 pillars are cognitive behavioral treatment or therapies. That is, as we did with the young adults, it's the way to think things through, to consider how do I consider these situations? How do I prepare myself for the future, and how do future engagements? A lot of times these folks don't have the training to be able to understand when faced with this situation, I need to address it in this way, or this would be a better way to address it. We do social enrichment. One of the things that especially causes men to die prematurely is their social isolation. You've probably been reading about it more. I've been seeing this a lot more in the newspapers, right? The men self-isolate.
Yes.
I don't need to reach out to Tony or to Chris. Like, I'm okay. It'll make me look weak or vulnerable or whatever reason we sometimes don't reach out. Women are much better at this, and they're healthier because of this. So we tend to isolate ourselves and become more and more isolated. We'll sit at home a lot more. We won't engage in social activities. Part of this is to teach them about some of these social activities and then to be aware of this as an issue. Education, constantly educating, learning new languages and skills We're studying books. They're actually studying some really difficult books that they are reporting on and speaking about and discussing in these groups. We do occupational therapy. This is again with BU, and occupational therapy is it's things like, I don't know, planning your day, setting out a plan, just kind of having things in order that a lot of people don't have that. How do I get through my day? How do I make a plan for my life? Things like that. And then healthy living. That's really about nutrition and sleep and physicality. And these are all the things that we're trying to teach them because, especially for guys, we forget that these are important to us. We isolate and we don't engage in these ways. And for that last 10 or 15 years of our lives, these can be much more enriching. And by the way, in the same time of being enriching for them and for their families, it'll also cause them not to become engaged in criminal behavior, which then costs all the rest of us taxpayers more money and more aggravation, and people become victimized by their crimes as well.
Let me ask you this, though, just so I'm just in layman's terms. So number one, who's picked for is it just age base? And then number two, give us a day in the life. So are they there? Are they going to different training program? Talk a little bit more in terms of the actual day in, day out activities. If I'm 55, do I just get picked to go to it? Or how does that work?
So 55 plus, although we've had people in there at 54 years old if they're appropriate, right? And now, not everyone wants to come to this unit, right? Some people just want to live out in the rest of the units. A lot of these guys, as they're older, can be victimized in other units, right? But a lot of them know how to handle themselves in jail. They know the jail politics, so they're not threatening. They're not threatened to be victims. Some of them might actually be, like the feeling of being almost as a mentor, as a leader in these units too, right? Right. And that was the case of Roger, who we reached out to, and he was quite fine, a fit guy, tough guy, and was not really interested in coming to the unit until we explained it to him, and then he came in, and he's the guy that's on the cover of that magazine. So this is one where anyone could qualify by being 55 plus. But you also have to have a record of good discipline. You have to be interested in participating, and then we prioritize based on these frailty indices and other things like that. Who needs it most, and are they getting out a certain period of time? And that's how we built up this program in that way. So you need to want to do it. We don't force you to do it, and then you also have to have well behaved, because you have a number of other privileges in this unit, and it's something that people want to do. So we want to make sure that people are earning their way into this unit.
And then just from a day in the life, so they get up, is there, again, classes they go to, training?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, every day they've got classes and trainings and exercise. So we're doing all this stuff. So it's a dorm style unit. It's a unit that we actually engage with our academic partners on little things, kind of interesting things, the heights of the beds. In the rest of the facility, the older guys get the bottom bunk because they can't climb on top of the top bunk. When we were working with Boston University, they indicated, that lower bunk that we would kind of use that is too low for these guys, right? They had a hard time getting up from the bunk. We don't think about that. So we actually said, well, what do you recommend the height would be? And they did some research and came back with a recommended height. They had a number of engagements like this. We have markings on the floor to guide them in the middle of the night, as they, have to use the restroom more often than most other folks do. We have colors in there that's based on color psychology. So there's a calming area in one. By the exercise area, we have specialized equipment for older adults. It's an electric blue to get their energy levels up. It's a lot of really interesting things like this where some might think it's not a big deal, and I understand that. But the fact is, it's always interesting when you engage in this and you try to make something a little bit better, because by doing this, they also understand what they need to be looking at as they age and they go back to their community too. How many of them would have thought about that?
Right.
just even sleep recovery was really important, and we needed to teach these guys. As we're realizing as society, we're not understanding sleep recovery, right? We're going to bed too late. We're not getting enough hours of sleep, and we know how it is tearing us down as a population. And so that's something we also stress in there, along with nutrition and cognitive engagement. So everything is about cognitive engagement. It's protective factors so that they become healthier, stronger, better thinking adults when they reenter their communities in a way that they just would have just been going along and getting along as they would have otherwise. And they have been for many years.
I love the psychology or the psychological approach that you provide here. I remember distinctly asking you the last time you were on how fearful you were. I remember we talked about you being the detractor and going against what a judge had said or what a good judge had recommended or whatever the case may be. My thought process now is we just recently did an episode that talked about local elections. And Tony put out some data on district attorneys and how you elect these people and how they have so much power and things of that nature. But one of the facts that sticks out as you're speaking is the United States, regardless of the population from a world perspective, have the greatest percentage of imprisoned individuals. Like we corner the market on prisoning, putting people in prison. And you are, sir, messing with the church's money because the economics, the economics that go into the prison system by you creating a non-repeat offender, by you making a human approach and dynamic to these inmates, these animals, these people in these cages, by not making them cages, by making them, habitats for people to actually be reformed. Why are you not getting more pushback from people who are profiting from the United States having such an invested interest in so many people going and being in prison and, more importantly, coming back?
So, Chris, that's a great point. I'm kind of in the business of trying to put myself out of business. Wouldn't that be
Yes,
nice,
sir.
right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's never going to happen, but the fact is, everything I do should be driven to that point. Now, right now, in many places across the country, sheriff's offices are being criticized for the cost of running that operation. The fact is, it's just an expensive operation to run. You've got staff. 85% of our costs are staff, right? Right. And the state recommends the raises that they get. So we don't do that. It's medication-assisted treatment that we do for the treatment of opioids and other drug disorders that the states are asking us to do, and they cost more money too. And so all these things are costing more money. The populations have been going down, but I believe that part of the reason the populations are going down is not because they're being charged less, not because of the DAs or the police. It's because of the sheriffs in the programs that we're running. We're driving down recidivism by the way we're treating people. And Chris, you said, you use that analogy to a zoo. This place is, these places are not zoos. If you treat people like animals, they'll behave like animals, and then they'll return to their communities like animals. Correct. If you treat them like human beings, they'll behave like human beings, again, making it safer inside that facility, but they'll return with a modicum of self-respect that they can take into the community of knowing that in the worst place that they should be, they were actually treated with respect and given some hope that they can be a better person. That is what's really gratifying when you know that has having an impact on those that are in our custody. But again, also on the officers that watch out for these folks and care for these folks. They feel better about their jobs as well. It's a safer environment. It's a more successful environment. And in the long run, it does save money. We're not spending all sorts of money on security, machines and in drones and all these things. We're a facility. We don't use tasers in our facility. We use spray, but we don't use tasers. And a lot of times people say, "Why aren't you using tasers?" They end a fight very quickly. We don't need to use tasers. We use de-escalation that has been so successful that, we don't really see the need to use tasers. And once we start using tasers, then it's hard to not use tasers more often. And then that starts to spread about the way that the officers feel and the inmates feel, and that can be a problem in the future, right? It hardens things. It hardens people when you have to use things like that. When I started in this job just 12 years ago, our population was about 1,200. annually, average daily population per day. Now it's about 800. But that number belies the fact that we have 4,000 people coming in and 4,000 people leaving our facility every single year. So it's not just like 800 people that we're treating. It's 4,000 people coming and going and coming and going. And when I started, because of the mental health issues that were going on, and we hadn't invested much into mental health or de-escalation before I got here, we were using the chair. It's this chair that you could strap someone down into, and it had wheels on the back so you could wheel them away and then release them after a couple of hours, whenever it was. We used to use that 4 or 5 times a week. I think we had to use the chair recently in one situation, but besides that, I don't remember the last time we've used it in many months. In fact, we sometimes have to struggle to figure out where we stored the chairs because our use of de-escalation is so successful right now. We don't need to use restraints in the ways that we used to do it.
Let's talk about your officers a little bit, because I know you care a lot about them, right? And
Yeah.
so how do you select and train the officers for this unit? And then how do you make sure that they are open to embracing these new programs as well?
So every time we open a new unit, we have specialized training for that unit, for that population. When I started this job and I offered new units, we'd offer this new training and we'd have officers sign up for the training. I suddenly started getting nervous about the fact, like, what if no one signs up for the training?
Right, exactly,
You create this new unit, and
Right.
what if no one signs up for it? And what we found was the number of people that signed up for it was vastly larger than we would have even expected. So whether it was young adult offender or our women's unit or any of the others, or this older adult reentry unit, many more people had signed up for the training. So now I think we've got 50 officers, I believe, that are trained for the older adult reentry unit. There's only usually 2 at a time in there. But it is something that each of these trainings doesn't affect just that unit, it affects the entire institution, because the training is something they take, again, not just in that unit, but use it elsewhere
They
too,
can use
right?
it across, got it.
Exactly. And so that each time there's a training, more officers get trained, the better they become at being officers, not just in that unit, but across the unit. What's really interesting about this unit is we've got some officers that, sometimes officers struggle. They've got a long career. And we've had officers in this unit that had been in for a long period of time. And then by being in this unit with this new training and with the new mission, they started becoming more engaged in the mission. And what was great was it came to the point when I was speaking earlier about culture driving culture, where we established a culture in there where the officers were coming up with their own solutions to issues or problems that we did not foresee. For instance, one of the officers came up with an idea that as people get older, they have more hearing problems or eyesight problems, right? Or they have both. And whereas sometimes when someone might be ignoring an officer, you would take it as insolence, right? You would take it as, they're being disrespectful, and then that would bring up levels of frustration and maybe a discipline at the same time, that it might be driven by a hearing impairment or a sight impairment. And so the officers themselves came up with a chart where they had each name of all the people in the unit and color-coded those that had hearing issues and sight issues in both, so that the officers that were coming in and out of that unit would also understand that maybe it was driven by something else. We did this thing. I'm just going to tell you this one interesting thing, and I know you're going to think it sounds very Massachusetts, but again, it just goes to show.
No, buddy, tell us.
Yeah. We did something called, we do work with a gang engagement organization called ROCA. They do great work. They did in Chelsea and Boston and Springfield, Mass. They're in Baltimore now. I went out in the street with some of these gang engagement workers. I don't know if you've ever seen any of this work. It's really powerful, going to some of the toughest neighborhoods and working people that were gang engaged, and to try to work with cognitive behavioral theory and therapy, like we do with our young adult and our older adult, and talk to them about how to get themselves out of that cycle. Really powerful work, really meaningful work. And part of the reason you see, gun violence and homicides in many of these cities that were skyrocketing at one point, coming down because of the work of these types of groups. They came to us and said, we'd like to do more training on what's called restorative justice circles. Restorative justice is where you speak about an issue. See, it's something that the communities think, oh my God, restorative justice, that will save everyone. We can have everyone that's committed a crime and they can come together with a victim and they can talk it through and they can understand each other's feelings and everyone go away feeling happy and the case is resolved and everyone learns something. Well, it doesn't work that easily, right? I mean, I'm a pretty progressive legislator. It doesn't work that easily. It works in only certain circumstances. So this group came in and they wanted to do restorative justice. So they came in and they dealt with some of the staff and some of the inmates in this, all the inmates in this unit, and they started doing the restorative justice thing, and a little bit touchy feely, and and I think the staff was doing it, which I appreciated, right? They were participating, and the inmates were participating, and I was just kind of nervous because again, I'm progressive, but I don't like to get too touchy feely on this stuff, and so I said to my superintendent of programs, my assistant superintendent of program services, hey, we got to make sure that we're doing this right. And when are they coming back in again? And it turns out that they were going to have one more session before they were going to start to use it. And the reason they were going to use it in the older adults unit is because older adults get into these beefs. They're small beefs that they get stuck in their ways and they can't change. And if people are messing with their certain little things in their lives, it's very different from any other age group. Right. So we're having these little conflicts building up in this unit that were causing problems in the unit. They were so easily solvable, but these guys couldn't couldn't open up their minds to it. So we thought this was a way to stop them from having disciplines and also learn a skill for the future where they don't get stuck in their own ways and can actually evolve and grow and become better people. They did this whole exercise. I said, when is the next one? And it turns out my assistant superintendent of program services, without his even knowing it, the inmates at the unit used a restorative justice circle themselves. They called it themselves. They didn't go through, right, again, culture, driving culture, right? We established a culture in there. So true. And they didn't go to, we didn't drive this thing. It was about something small. You want to know what it was about? Funny little thing. They have a box yard outside of their unit where there's a lot of pigeons and birds and stuff like that. Some of the guys like to feed the pigeons, right? But they were feeding them just food from the mess hall, basically, It wasn't, and the pigeons were soiling the handrails and they were in different areas and it was becoming this conflict and we didn't even know about this. They called their own restorative justice circle. They came out with their own rules. They said, okay, we're only going to feed the birds like bread and rice and certain things like that. We're only going to feed the birds in this area, and we're only going to feed the birds at this time of the day. They worked it out all themselves, no problems. Inmates are happy, officers are happy, birds are happy, right? So, but it's something that we started, and again, Chris, as you say, it sounds touchy-feely, but the fact it worked and it avoided a conflict that would have continued to roil in that unit, and it sounds silly. I'll be honest with you, it sounds silly, but the fact is, if it works, I'm going to do it. I don't care if it sounds silly. If it works. If it doesn't work, then I'm not doing it at all, and I'll be suspicious of it anyway, as I was with this, but it turns out it has worked really well in this unit on this and other issues going on in there too.
Why I would consider you as one of the best guests we've had on a Black Executive Perspective is because it doesn't come off initially as you being an executive. But when you think about it, I've worked at Fortune 500 companies where we brought in Division I coaches, right? The Coach K's. And one of the things that seems to be a reoccurring theme is cultural reformation, changing the culture. And you bang that drum over and over again as an executive. So although you were sheriff of the year, you should be nominated some way to be executive of the year because you're really running this thing as an executive, thinking about the macro perspective of the impact while also understanding the micro inputs, right? And that's what true executives do. That's what we are bringing to the table here, having these conversations with you. So first of all, I appreciate that and just wanted to acknowledge you as a wonderful leader and an executive. In the idea of when did you think this could be executized? When did you think something that you got into could be run like a Division I powerhouse football team or a high functioning Fortune 10 company? Because that's how you're running it. Or did you just Kramer your way into this, just accidentally kind of stumbled and bumbled and ended up doing a couple things right and said, damn, that feels good.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say, what did you think? Kramer did? Is that you Kramer?
Yeah.
Like Seinfeld Kramer?
Yes, yeah.
That's great, Chris. So I will say this. We just did it. Like, I won't say this is great. Like, honestly, Coach K and the others, they talk this great vision and we're going to do this and that. And sometimes it's like actually works and sometimes it's completely baloney, right? How many times have you heard leaders speak in these soaring rhetorical terms that you say, oh my God, that's amazing, values-based this and that. And then you realize they're full of baloney, right? That they're not really doing that, or they're talking about it and then they're leaving before they actually establish a culture.
Right.
I hate that. I just hate that. And I see that happening in public service across the country right now, where people are coming and going every couple of years, claiming they're reforming a culture, but really all they're doing is changing it on the edges and then leaving it for someone else to change it in a different way or to go back to the way it was, right? I've been fortunate to be here now 15 years. And I first, when I first became sheriff, I thought, I'll be able to change this place around in, a couple of years. People told me it'll take you 5 years. I was horrified by that. Like, no way. I'm the great Peter Koutoujian. This will be done in 2 years. And in fact, we were both wrong. It was way longer than that. It was way longer than that to do it.
Right.
So I will say that it's not this great, I don't have this overarching view or vision of leadership. It's just something I guess just try and do it every day. And that I get people around me that are also able to help me get it done every day. And what you find is if you're doing the right thing every day, then everything else takes care of itself. So I guess what I'd say as I'm thinking about it, I haven't really thought about this before, is by doing the work, you change the culture, right? You don't change the culture to do the work. You do the work and then you can change the culture. It might be the other way around, maybe a way to think about that. Because it's not like I said, when I speak about the programs and the people. I don't speak in soaring rhetoric. I'm speaking about practical application stuff, and that is the stuff that changes. But I'll say, in when you look back, the culture we've achieved here is truly spectacular, coming from where we were to where we are now. But it's the work of myself as a leader, but some great staff around me that buy into the same vision and help me continue to drive it on their own.
I mean, but to Chris's point, though, even the story that you told about how the inmates were able to solve their own issues or incorporated the same, thought process that you put together on their own. Those things, that's a huge thing. Okay, that is huge, and that is culture. Okay, and to Chris's point, culture is not about somebody banging and says we're winners and this and that. Culture is when people start doing it on their own.
Exactly.
That's
right.
when you've changed, or you're in the process of changing a culture, right? And that takes time. But to his point, that takes somebody with vision, takes somebody that actually gives a damn, okay? And I don't want this to be missed, because he said something that's key here, who looks at macro and micro. Right? A lot of people look at macro, right? But at the end of the day, you can never get there unless you focus on the micro to build that culture that'll eventually become macro, right?
Right.
So speaking of that, my friend, where does this, so what's the end game on this? Like, where do you tell us a little bit. I know if I read this correctly, this was launched March of this year, if I'm right?
October of last year.
October so it's been a year now.
Yep.
So talk to us, like, what does the data say? Tell us, where is this going? How is this changing lives? And then what do you see as the future? Is this something just a Massachusetts thing, or do you see this as something that can be scaled across all the different correction in facilities around the country? So
I will say, to that last point, Tony, is not just that it can be, but it should be. It needs to be. It needs to be. It's not just a matter of can it be. It needs to be. As 1 in 4 of our population will be over the age of 60 in just 5 years alone, right? That's a significant population that if we don't address this, and it's going to be the same number in our carceral facilities, right? These people are going to, the people in our jail represent the people in the general population. So this is what's happening in our jails as well. And so it's not just that it can be, but it must be replicated or something along these lines. And that's why I speak about it all the time. The data is only a year, so we don't have a whole lot of recidivism data.
Okay.
Quite honestly, I think that a lot of it will be quality of life data. It may not be just that they are arrested, but are they able to find, again, not just a job or an apartment or things like that. Can we help them? Can we help reunite them with their families? Are they going to have a better quality of life? Are they going to be happier as they move on to that next 10 or 15 years of their lives, as well as not commit other crimes?
Or they don't become Brooks like in Shawshank Redemption, right?
That's right.
Where, you know, he, like Chris was saying earlier, you want to go back.
Yeah.
Because he can't handle this new world.
Remember the scene, like, you know, when he's like walking out and, you know, he's like out in front of the gates and like, what do I do now? Right. You know,
exactly.
We don't want to leave people in the front of the gates, you know, like in the movies where they say, what do I do now? Like, where do I go now? You want, part of that is the plan, that we help them with their plan, and then we help them implement that plan. And so that's, you know, and so, yes, we've spoken in Baltimore recently, got rave. It was really exciting to watch people embrace this. Like, it's when sometimes you want to know, it seems like an interesting program, but when you go and you speak about it, and maybe you speak about it with some passion and excitement and some data,
which you are good at, right?
All in, right? Yeah. Like, I just get excited about it. People are all in. Now we're speaking to the National Sheriff's Association in some weeks and American Jail Association coming up. But we won an award recently for Innovation of the Year with this program from the Mass Sheriff's Association. So it's exciting to see the recognition, but the recognition is really just a means to spread it further. And if it's not this model, I think this model is quite honestly probably an unassailable, probably the better model. But as long as people are thinking about this, and again, not just a housing unit, but a treatment unit, you know, you don't want to just house people together. You want to do something for them while they have that opportunity and they're all together. That's the key.
Excellent point. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was just, you know, you were talking about, you know, the warehouse model and how you're really trying to rehabilitate. And I think that we don't really understand, people who don't know this world or understand that it's a whole subculture that exists in prisons and things of that nature, and things are run a certain way and unwritten rules and all these other things. And you're really dismantling or illuminating how it doesn't have to be this way, and how it doesn't have to be bread and water and, you know, hose them down and all this other stuff. Like, there's a level of dignity you could have even if you've made a mistake. We're the country of second chances. That doesn't mean you're not accountable. That doesn't mean you don't get the repercussions of what you've done. But I mean, there's such thing as cruel and unusual. And I think you're taking the cruelty out of some of these sentences. And that's really a wonderful thing that you're trying to do.
You know, one thing that I'll say is if you come up to our facility, and I hope that someday you guys get the chance to come up and tour our facility.
We'll do a live show from there.
What's that?
So we'll do a live show from there.
That would be great. We actually maybe have some of the incarcerated folks in there too. That'd be kind of cool.
Exactly.
But I think what you'll generally see, you know, I knock on wood here a little bit, is a clean facility, a facility that smells good, it's bright, and it's quiet. Right? Now, that's generally what you see in our facility. Now, things, you know, we have the same amount of fights. I mean, we got a lot of bad guys up there too. So I don't want to be, they're not all victims of circumstance up there. A lot of bad guys up there. They're doing bad things even up there, and they can be very dangerous up there too, right? But it's the way the institution is run. For instance, you guys see the TV shows like 60 Days In and all the lockups and all those shows. We would never be featured on a show like that because we'd be too damn boring. Right. It's too well run. It's too bright. It's too clean. We don't let that stuff fester. We watch out for the people in our custody and care. We have significant mental health supports for those that are in our care. So what I feel like sometimes we're the victim of our own success, because when we have legislators that will come up and check out our facility, they'll be very impressed, but they leave thinking they just visited a community college. And you don't know. It's because of the work that our officers do that it seems like that. Don't take that for granted. That is something that we do really well. It's not like that every place else. And there's a reason for that. It's because our officers do a great job up there. And so I always have to be mindful of the fact that, you know, sometimes we have to bring visitors into some of the units where they can see more activity. They can feel the tension. They can feel the vibe that goes on in there and understand what we're doing overall in this facility to make it a safer, healthier, more well institution that provides better results as people leave our facility as well.
So, my friend, as we close here, final thoughts. What's the one message you want listeners to absorb from this conversation?
Man, one of the things I'd like to say is public service. You know, I mean, I love what I get to do. You know, public service is about serving others. Up here in my correctional facility, I serve the least of us, you know, the people that have sinned, so to speak, that most people forget about, want to forget about, don't care about, want them, as you said, Chris, to be, you know, bread and water. And the nobility of what I get to do for corrections professionals, right? It's something really powerful. And so one thing I always say the corrections officers and staff are, I call them the silent guardians of public safety. We know what firefighters do. We know what police do. We know what first responders do, ambulance personnel do. And we say we appreciate their service. No one really knows what corrections officers do. They don't get to see them in uniform in the community. They're behind the walls with a lot of bad people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on every holiday. Like with a veteran, if you meet a corrections officer, or if you know a corrections officer and meet a corrections officer, they say thank you for their service. They deserve it, man. It's a really hard job. They do a great job at it, and they deserve our praise as a society because they just don't get it often enough for a very difficult job.
You always come and provide such jewels and things that we don't think about. It's kind of like where, you know, the military says they're protecting freedoms while we're sleeping. We don't even know the freedoms that they're protecting. My question to you is, how can a Black Executive Perspective podcast help you? Because you've done so much to help us in our audience.
There's no question.
Well, you have already helped me, man. You know, your award-winning podcast is spreading the word about what we're doing. And we're not bound by race. We're bound by caring about people, right? We're bound by speaking about difficult conversations, and sometimes that affect vulnerable communities. It is spreading this word about what you're doing to continue to you continue to do what you do, but let people know about what we do in corrections and what can be done in public service in this opportunities, you know, these windows of opportunities we have to change people's lives in a profound way. Not even just change people's lives, but to save people's lives. One of the things I've thought about more recently, because our population is so chronically ill, it's called a chronicity of our population. Sometimes 70% are chronically ill, and that could be for mental health and asthmas and cancers and heart disease and all the other things. They're a very chronically ill population, and we need to appreciate that chronicity. And I can't remember, what was I just talking about? What, you guys bring me right back to where I was.
No. You were just saying about, you know, us helping you be able to promote the message in terms of what you guys are doing.
The word.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think just telling people about that, man. I mean, we deal with a sick population, and it's a noble profession. And I just want more people to understand what we do and to care about it like you guys do. That's really important, because not enough people care about this population, care about this mission like you guys have.
Well, to be fair, though, my friend, and this, again, not hyperbole, and we're not blowing smoke here. And I only can speak for myself. And I'm pretty sure Chris, he's in Dallas. I'm in Connecticut outside of New York. But I'm pretty sure he would probably agree. I've never met a sheriff Koutoujian before somewhere else. Okay? And I'm just being honest with you, right? The mindset, Chris said, bread and water. You see what I'm saying? And that's the mindset, right? And so, buddy, we're very blessed that not only that you came on, but that there are people like you that actually are looking to not just punish people, but to also see them as humans, okay? And see their families as humans, and have the vision to say, this person will get out one day. And I didn't have anything to do with what they did to come in, but I can and have the opportunity to affect, to set them up on their way out. Right. And so that's a special person. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, our audience and the community should be very blessed that we have somebody like you. And more importantly, we pray that we can find other people like you. Okay? Because that, buddy, what you bring to the table and what you do, it's just, I know you look at it like, oh, I look at it like this and I'm trying to do this. We look at it, at least I'm speaking for me, I look at it as God sent. Okay? Because that changes the mindset. And more importantly, you have a big effect on the community once these people come out.
Absolutely. And I'll say this as we close. I have family members and friends that have been incarcerated, and one of the testimonies they have is, I had to go in there, figure it out for myself really quick, and understand the unwritten rules or the subcultures within the system. And what you're doing is alleviating some of those hardships by making a more strict, sterile, understood, time sensitive, like you're putting so much context into why you're here. You're here to serve your time, get better, survive, and go home and be a productive member. And it's taken away all of the stress that I've heard from a testimony they had to go through just showing up, young, older, otherwise.
Right. Well, they
got to go through so much stress.
That institutionalizes them, right?
Institutionalized.
Yes,
what do you think? What happens if that's how they have to live their lives in there just to survive? They come back out. Do they come out better or worse for that experience? We know the answer to that.
Absolutely. And it becomes a college for criminals is what they call it.
That's right.
And you're taking that stigma away, and I salute you and appreciate that.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Absolutely. So we want to thank Sheriff K for appearing on a Black Executive Perspective podcast, for coming back again. And obviously we're going to have him come back again, because we want to keep hearing of what he's doing to innovate corrections here in the United States. So thanks a lot, Sheriff K.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Chris.
So I think it's now time for
Tony's Tidbit.
And the tidbit today: innovation isn't a luxury in justice. It's a responsibility. When you're confronted with a broken system, you have a choice: accept it as it is or rebuild it into what it should be. True leaders don't stand still. They do the hard work of reconstruction so the people the system serves can finally experience dignity, safety, and real change. And you heard a lot of that from our brother up in Massachusetts, Sheriff K.
So we always want to make sure that we remind you to check out Need to Know with Nasinga. Don't miss this week's episode of Need to Know, where Dr. Nasinga Burton provides timely and insightful commentary that shape our community and our world. Tune in to her unique perspectives, because Dr. Burton is a powerhouse, and this is the right time of year to end it off strong, and she'll help you do so you don't want to miss it.
Absolutely. And don't miss the next episode of Pull Up, Speak Up, where our roundtable gets together. Bold, unfiltered voices tackle the most provocative issues. Their sharp perspective, real talk, and a call to action. Tune in to join the revolution here on a Black Executive Perspective podcast.
Make sure you tune in and check us out Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern live, where you can provide your real-time commentary back and forth with Tony and I, and we enjoy to engage with the population and to our audience. But at this time, we also want to make sure we'd be remiss if we didn't give you our call to action, and that is to remind you to incorporate less, LESS. Our goal here is to eliminate all forms of discrimination, and to achieve this, we're asking you to embrace less. The L stands for learn. Educate yourself on social, racial, and cultural nuances to make sure that you go in informed and armed to speak appropriately on your own behalf.
Absolutely. And then after you learn, you have the letter E, which stands for empathy. Now, since you've learned about different cultural nuances, social nuances that you're not familiar with, now you can understand their perspective, because you can put yourself in their shoes.
The first S stands for share. You want to enlighten others to your perspective and your insights. Don't hide it, divide it. Like Sheriff Koutoujian said, even if they don't think it works here, share it with them and let them see for themselves. Because a lot of things that we think won't make it will.
Absolutely. And then the final S stands for stop. We want everyone to stop discrimination as it walks in your path. It is as simple as Aunt Jenny or Uncle Joe saying something inappropriate at the Sunday dinner table. Instead of you sitting there with your mouth open, shocked, or you're giggling, you say, Aunt Jenny, Uncle Joe, we don't believe that. We don't say that. And you stop it right there. So if everyone can incorporate less, LESS, we'll build a more fair, more understanding world. And we all, guess what? We'll see the change that we want to see. And guess what? I got this from my boy, Sheriff K, because less will become more.
So we want to make sure that I'm glad that you enjoyed this episode. Want to make sure you tune into our previous episode in the catalog. Check out our first episode with Sheriff K, and he'll be back for the next episode. He'll be in a prominent part of the catalog. But make sure you go and sign up for the newsletter. Make sure you go to the website. The newsletter is the monthly perspective. It's hot off the presses. Make sure you check that out. Give us a review. Let us know things you might want to hear about. Subscribe wherever you're listening. And where can they find us, Tony?
My friend, you can find a Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to check out us on our social channels of LinkedIn, X, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, at A Black Exec. For our fabulous guest, the innovative leader, Sheriff Peter Koutoujian of Massachusetts. For my man down in Dallas, the co-host with the most, my boy, Chris P. Reed. I'm Tony Tidbit. We talked about it. We learned about it. We're going to continue to strive and thrive about it. We love you. And guess what? We're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.